Podcast City Network.
What is up? What is up? Welcome back to episode 153 of the Nest podcast entitled Tough Break. With the title like that, you know what we have to talk about tonight, Zach, and that is the results from UFC 264, where Conor McGregor broke his leg. Big time event that we both watched, that we were both keeping up with as it all unfolded. I'm excited to get into that. I'm excited to get into picking narrowing down rather the NFC side of your NFL team bracket. We're quickly moving into the final, I believe, 8 of the NFL coming up very soon. So it'll be exciting to narrow that list down a little bit more. And then, of course, it's the All-Star break for Major League Baseball. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Thank you guys for going out and sharing all of the links for our podcast. That's been outstanding, helping us grow, helping us get more listeners, more involved. I do appreciate all of that. Everyone that shares any of our videos between, a couple weeks ago up until our 3-year anniversary show is going to be entered into a drawing to win a Nest Podcast t-shirt, some Nest Podcast swag. So keep sharing out the links, tagging your friends in the comments, letting people know, hey, the Nest is live. Come and tune in. Come and leave us comments. Let us know your thoughts of what we're talking about. It's going to be a good time tonight, Zach. But we do need to start the show off with a bit of breaking news. It was breaking earlier today, at least. We're not breaking the news currently. But remember a couple weeks ago, we told the listeners that it would be pretty cool if Shohei Ohtani not only got to be a DH in the All-Star game, but if he also got to pitch an inning, maybe the 6th inning or something like that. Well, we found out last week and told the listeners that in fact was going to happen. Shohei was going to be a pitcher and a hitter in the All-Star game. It was announced today that Shohei Ohtani is the starting pitcher for the American League All-Star team. He'll be going up against Max Scherzer in that All-Star game. So a pretty fun little pitching duel right there. But he'll also be hitting leadoff. This is something that no one, I repeat, no one has ever done before. Zach, we were watching history with this All-Star game.
Yeah, this is crazy. I'm shocked. I mean, there are so many good pitchers out there. It's kind of shocking that they went with him, but I mean, this guy is super special. And I think they definitely want to capitalize on that. And it's going to be a very interesting thing to watch a guy lead off and start a game, an all-star game. I mean, it's wild. And hats off to him. This is crazy.
Harvey Reid commenting, saying that he predicts that Shohei is going to win the trophy tonight as well. So that would be, for those listening live, the home run derby. Harvey thinks he's going to win the home run derby. Didn't buy the hype, but you cannot deny the talent is real. Absolutely. I was a doubter at first myself, but I went on record before this season even started and said he's going to be the MVP. He's shown glimpses. He's shown flashes of brilliance, but this is the first season that he's ever been able to stay healthy enough to put it all together on the field. And if he is able to stay this healthy throughout an entire Major League Baseball season, is there any reason that you can think of that anybody else would be named the most valuable player?
No, there's no one that even comes close. No one is out there pitching and hitting as well as he is. I mean, and I think if he was just a DH, he might be in the running because he's leading the league in home runs and he's just going out there and crushing the ball. And he's able to do both. To me, that's an automatic MVP.
Yeah, it's unreal what he's doing. The comparison is always going to be there between he and Babe Ruth. and people are like, oh, well, we haven't seen anything happen like this since Babe Ruth. Shohei Ohtani is better than Babe Ruth.
Yeah, 100%.
Babe didn't have to face anybody throwing 90 plus. Now Shohei faces upper 90s to triple digits every single night. Babe never saw anything like that. The Babe couldn't even touch triple digits with his fastball hitting or throwing. Shohei's out there throwing triple digits too. It's unreal what this dude is doing. He's sick. Babe Ruth wouldn't survive in today's game.
Yeah. There's no one to compare Shohei to, and I guess that's why people use Babe Ruth, is because he's the closest thing that he was able to pitch and hit well. But like you said, there's no one out there that's able to do this as well as Shohei is doing. So I hope he can survive the All-Star break here. I've said before that the home run derby is an iffy one for me because they have to swing for the fences over and over and over, and it kind of messes with guys after a while. But we'll see. And we've got a pretty interesting little lineup here for the home run derby. So I'm excited to watch that later tonight.
Yeah, I am too. As soon as we log off around 8:00, that's what I'll be turning on to my TV to watch the home run derby. I'm excited for it there in Coors Field. Ball should be flying out of that ballpark tonight. It'll be exciting. Did you hear what Stephen A. Smith said about Shohei Ohtani while we're on the subject?
I haven't.
He was asked, what he felt like in regard to Shohei Ohtani being the face of baseball and the most, the best player out there or whatever. And he said, I don't think it helps that the number one face is a dude that needs an interpreter. Saying like, oh, he can't be the face of baseball if he can't get on a mic and talk on his own. He needs to have somebody else as a mouthpiece. So like Stephen A's kind of shutting down the idea that he can be the guy. I don't think so. Like we just said, dude starting the All-Star game as a pitcher and a hitter. He's also in the home run derby, leading the league in home runs. This dude is a complete package. Why do you need to have him talking into a mic? Mike Trout famously doesn't talk. He doesn't get in interviews and stuff like that very often. He's not the most vocal person in the league, yet he's been the face of the league for the past 10 years. Shohei Ohtani is doing things that even the great Mike Trout hasn't been able to accomplish. Who cares if he can speak English or not?
Yeah, I don't really get that take either. People were saying that Tatis was the new face of baseball, and if you've ever heard him talk, he's got a pretty thick Spanish accent, and I'm sure his English isn't the greatest. In a sport like baseball, you don't need to go out and be in the media and do all kinds of interviews like people like LeBron and people like that do. I think the body of work speaks for themselves, and especially in baseball, at least baseball fans are 100% used to the idea of foreigners being good at the sport and being the top of the sport. You're talking about guys like Ichiro. I mean, the list goes on. Pedro. These are guys who are not, the homegrown American as we all think about it. Nonetheless, people love them and people respect the hell out of them, and they're great at their craft. I don't see how that makes a difference at all. This guy is really special talent wise, and I don't think people care that he can't speak English.
Yep, I don't either. I think it's kind of a cold take for Stephen A. And he immediately came out, and after he was getting so much backlash on Twitter and all that stuff, he came out with his apology message and all that stuff. Of course he did.
Yeah.
And I think it was our friend Stacy that put up a tweet that was the line from the Reds announcer when he was apologizing, and then mid apology was like, and there's a drive by Nick Castellanos and it's a home run. It was like the most like, oh, I'm apologizing, but I'm going to misdirect and try to keep doing my job before I get fired. I kind of felt like that was the same situation with Stephen A. Smith, as he was like, I'm only apologizing because they're telling me to.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And I agree. That's a dumb take. And I think those guys like that are full of those. And honestly, I take what they say with a grain of salt. They're out there to say whatever they think might be controversial to get them shares and get them more views. I think they have their takes that are, whatever, decent or whatever you might call it. But for the most part, at least in my opinion, the dudes like that are out there to shock you and to try to get a conversation started and try to just gain shares and likes and follows and whatever it might be, because that's just the way the world is now. I mean, you can't just go out there and give a solid take and be done with it. You have to shock people and you have to get people talking about it. And I think that's exactly what he was doing here. He kind of knew that would be a weird, risque thing to say, if you will, and it backfired. I don't think you're going to find very many people that agree with him on that.
No, it was a cold take, and it was definitely one that I'm sure his agent, his the people around him were probably like, that one needs to be retracted instantly, especially with everything that happened over the past few months with Asians in our country. Let's not get into that, but I know it's been a pretty hot topic around those watering holes. Let's discuss what happened in Las Vegas on Saturday night, UFC 264. The undercard was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch any of the prelims, but I did watch some of the undercard, and it was pretty good. And I remember I was texting you. I'm like, hey, have you turned it on yet? Like, you need to be watching. Some of these fights are pretty legit. But you ended up turning on for the main card, and you caught the Sean O'Malley, Chris Moutinho fight, right?
It's insane. Yeah, that was
you did catch that one?
Yeah,
dude, it was absolutely insane. First off, the Vegas odds pretty much said that it was 100% chance for Sean O'Malley to win that fight, basically saying like, this is a no contest. He's just thrown out there on 10 days notice, mind you, to be basically just another win for Sugar Sean.
Mm-hmm.
But he didn't make it easy, did he?
No, not at all. And this was a guy who I had never heard of. I didn't know anything about him other than he had wild colored hair, and matched up great with Sean O'Malley. And went out there, and boy, did he eat some punches. And I think that was like the biggest talking point about the whole fight. He didn't really put up a big fight against O'Malley, but he just ate everything that Sean O'Malley was throwing. It was wild to see.
Like I was texting you and Adam about it, and in the first round of that fight, like I was getting some serious flashbacks to playing Call of Duty Zombies, because this dude was just coming straight at him. And I think it was Adam that pointed out, like, he's not moving his head at all. His head is on a straight line. It was just like them zombies just coming straight for you. You're shooting them in the shoulder and they just keep coming. Like, this dude, he is the Massachusetts Zombie. And if that isn't his official fighter nickname by the end of the week, it should be, because people are dropping the ball, because this dude, he was getting destroyed. I think they said that Sugar Sean landed 80% of the punches that he threw, which is an insane amount of punches thrown, and the accuracy that he was throwing. Dude, the mercy rule. That's the only way that I could describe that from Herb Dean, is the mercy rule came into play for the first time ever, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'm stunned that he never fell, and I think Sean O'Malley is stunned as well. Like, he was just giving it to him, and it's wild that he didn't drop. And I'm sure he was feeling it the next day. But geez, I would think with a guy like that, they can eat a lot of those shots. Work on some head movement. I mean, if you can move around a little bit more, you might have something there, because if somebody does catch you with something, you'll be able to eat it. So yeah, I hope he can move on from this fight and learn a little bit more, because if you've got a chin like that, you might be able to make something of a career in the UFC.
What did you think of that stoppage, though? Do you think that they should have let him go on for the remaining 29 seconds of the fight, or were you like, okay, yeah, I've definitely seen enough. No need for this guy to just keep taking abuse?
No, I think it was a good stoppage. I think there was an obvious just dominance there, and there was nothing that how do you say his name? Mahino or something?
Yeah, Moutino.
That
Mutino.
There was no chance for him to come back in that fight, and I think Herb was looking out for his health. he was going to eat 10, 15, how many ever more shots, and it wasn't really going to change anything. So I think that was smart. At the end of the day, the referee is supposed to be looking out for the fighter's health, and I think that's what he did. He had plenty of opportunity to get something going before in the fight, and it just never happened. And sure, he can eat all those shots and stay on his feet, but I think at some point you've got to just say, this is enough. You've taken enough damage. There's no way he was going to win a decision, so you might as well just end it.
Yeah, I mean, part of me thinks that like he earned that decision and it was taken from him, because there's a certain badge of honor that you can wear for going the distance with a guy that was supposed to knock you out in the first round, as opposed to getting stopped just short of that. I'm sure he wanted the fight to continue. He wanted to go to the decision victory, even though he knew that it was going to be probably a 30-24 score because he got destroyed all 3 rounds. But still, I'm sure he wanted that decision instead of getting that stoppage. But I agreed with it too. At first I was a little bit outraged by it, but then I sat back and thought, I was like, dude, his face got pounded for 14 minutes and 31 seconds.
Yeah. I'll say this. If you want to go the distance and you want to get that, then you need to do something more than just sit there and eat punches. You got to move around.
You got to move that head. You got to, but man, no matter how many times he got punched in the face, he just kept coming forward, didn't he?
Wild. I wonder how long he can keep that up. I can't imagine that's something you can sustain for a long career.
Who knows? I don't think that that's the way to have longevity in your career for sure. But it does make me kind of question Sugar Sean a little bit. Like, how's he going to be when he's going in there with top talent if he can't put away this guy?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe this guy's just a freak. Who knows? Because we've seen his knockout power against, I can't remember that.
A lot of people.
I mean, he's been able to knock out people with one punch. So I don't know. It's hard to say. I think he's an exciting fighter for sure. And I think he's, barring that last loss, I think he's definitely on his way to being a contender. So I think it's just a matter of time before we see just what he brings to the table when it comes to those top guys.
On that loss that you speak of has a little bit of an asterisk beside of it because he got hurt during that fight. So
right,
very well could have been a doctor stoppage, kind of like what we saw at the end of the McGregor fight.
Right.
Tai Tuivasa. Is that how you pronounce that name?
Yeah, I'm not
Tai Tuivasa. that dude, he the guy that knocked out Greg Hardy.
Yeah.
The Australian guy. He was a guy that I don't think a lot of people really knew of. Nope. A lot of people don't really know of him, haven't really saw him before, but now he has a ton of new fans. I'm sure his Twitter following shot up following UFC 264, and it's not because, partially because he knocked out Greg Hardy with one little bear claw left hook, but it was because he immediately jumped up on the side of the cage and did a shoey.
Yeah.
And then proceeded to do several more as he was walking his way back through the crowd. So the man likes to party, the man likes to get down, but the man can fight.
Yeah. I think that was a perfect combo. I mean, what more could you do to appease to UFC fans than to get a knockout and then chug a beer through a shoe? I mean, that was perfect.
It was definitely wild. I never would have expected him to jump up on the cage and do that shoey, but the fact that he was even letting the fans take their shoes off and he was doing shoeys out of their shoes and stuff, dude's a wild man. What did you think of the actual fight though? Obviously it was only a 1-round knockout, which made the main event come so much earlier than it normally would have. But what did you think? Do you think that this guy has what it takes to be one of the top contenders, or is Greg Hardy just one of those guys that'll always be almost good enough?
I think that was an impressive kind of breakout fight for Tai, I guess his first name is.
Yeah.
And
Tuivasa.
This is an opportunity for him to continue a little bit of a win streak. Greg Hardy is not one of those guys who's, a person that you want to beat and then that propels you on to being a number one contender or anything, but he has been in the UFC for a while. He's got some fights under his belt. He's he's a legitimate athlete, if not a legitimate MMA fighter. So you can say that you've beaten a guy who's potentially been around a little bit longer than you and has a bigger name than you. So I think any win, especially of knockout fashion, is good. And I mean, he's got a much bigger following now, I'm sure. So that is always good. This made, this made him kind of break out into the spotlight. And I think that always catches Dana's attention. So I think Dana is going to, have his name in the back of his mind for a future fight more than anyone else who might have just won and humbly kind of just left the octagon or whatever. I think that's the thing now. Dana and all those other promoters are looking for a fight that's going to sell. And if this guy has a little bit of a following, it's kind of interesting to see. He has a knockout under his belt now. He might get a shot a little bit earlier, or he might get some love from the UFC brass because he's a little bit more eccentric than your average fighter. So I think this is the potential for a little bit of a early jump start to his career.
Yeah, I'm looking to see if he's anywhere near the rankings, and I'm not even seeing him. Greg Hardy's 25th for heavyweights, so he's bound to be somewhere around there, but I don't even see him on the list right now. So yeah, he's got an upward climb. Oh, he's right there in 13.
Oh, nice.
13th. Yeah. He's jumped up. So maybe a fight with Walt Harris coming up would be good for him. Walt is at 11th. That could be a nice way for him to try to start getting up into that top 10. Or maybe if he's getting such a good push behind it, maybe he can jump into a fight with somebody in that top 10. So it will be excited to see how he progresses from here on. And if he starts getting some of these bigger fights, like maybe Alexander Volkov or Rosenstrike or somebody like that, that would be impressive if he's able to keep the party going.
Yeah, absolutely.
Gilbert Burns fought Stephen Thompson and got the unanimous decision on that one. And Vegas and everybody had Stephen Thompson as the winner or as the favorite to win the fight. So Gilbert Burns came in and was a pretty big underdog. Do you see it as the upset that everybody was making it out to be? Because I don't.
No, I don't really either. I mean, sure, you have to give Wonder Boy the respect because he's just an absolute legend in the sport and a veteran. But I mean, Gilbert Burns went toe to toe with the champ Usman, so he's got his stripes, at least in my opinion. And I think he's a hot young contender, and I think it's going to be very difficult for anyone in that division to compete with Usman. But he's definitely done it before, and obviously, just by his age, Wonder Boy is kind of on his way out. So I don't think that was a big upset at all.
That's what I was thinking. Like Wonder Boy is full on Wonder Man. He's grown from a boy to a man in mixed martial arts, and Gilbert Burns he's on his come up. Like you said, this dude's been hot. He went toe to toe with the champ, which is something that nobody else has been able to do, and he held his own. I mean, and for what it's worth, Wonder Boy's style is very conducive of either knocking people out or losing decisions, because he's going to sit there and let you throw punches so that he can try to counter strike your punches.
Right.
And if someone as skilled as Gilbert Burns is going to be sitting there throwing punches, he's going to land a lot of them, even though you're good at defense.
Yep. Yeah, and that's Wonder Boy's thing is he's not necessarily the guy who's going to go out there and initiate attacks and be on the offense. He's just looking to counter you. He's looking for an opening while you're throwing some big haymaker, and he's going to touch you on the chin. And like you said, if that doesn't happen, he'll lose a decision. I mean, he's not a guy who has much left in his arsenal. And I think that was figured out years ago by Tyron Woodley. So yeah, this was an interesting one to me too, because what else does Wonder Boy have to prove? I mean, he's definitely not in title contention. There's no way he's going to be able to compete with Kamaru Usman. So I guess this is just an old veteran fighting one of the young guys to see if one of the young guys is legit. But yeah, this was not a no-brainer for me, but I mean, I did not agree with the odds. This was a fight that was Gilbert Burns's to lose for sure.
Yeah. I guess this is after the fight. They've got Gilbert Burns who is now moved up to number 4 there in that division. So he's moving his way up the welterweights and is trying to compete at some of these top spots. He's got Leon Edwards, Colby Covington, and then, of course, the champ ahead of him.
Yeah.
So,
and in my opinion, I think that's one of the toughest divisions right now in the UFC. That belt is I mean, just about clinched for a while. And Colby Covington, no matter what you think about him, is no slouch. So it's going to be tough. So I look for a lot of good fights in that division.
Yep. Wonder Boy Stephen Thompson has dropped down to 7 now. So like you said, he's pretty much out of title contention. Will be interesting to see what happens with that guy.
Yep.
Dustin Poirier beat Conor McGregor for the second consecutive time, but this one had a little bit of I don't want to say controversy, but it had kind of a false finish, if you will. Like, I don't really feel like we've got the finality out of that trilogy. And boy, did they hype up this trilogy being like a huge one and all that stuff. But now they're sitting there like, well, they didn't get the finish that they wanted. It's not a definitive victory because McGregor broke his leg and the doctor had to step in and stop the fight. But it's not like he was going to win on 1 foot because he wasn't even winning on 2 feet. He was getting pretty much worked up by Dustin Poirier. Yeah, he landed some good kicks early. Yeah, he landed a few shots here and there. Conor did. But Dustin was surgical with his strikes. And whenever McGregor pulled guard and was going for that guillotine and couldn't get it, and then he was just getting teed off on there on the ground, I knew Dustin was going to win that fight, but I didn't think it was going to be that way. Yeah. And the antics after the fight we can get into a little bit as well. But what did you think about this fight?
That first round was 100% definitive. I mean, Poirier owned that first round. You're not going to win a round just by getting a few kicks off. So that first round was Poirier's all the way. And then, of course, like you said, we had the unfortunate finish of a doctor stoppage due to Conor breaking his leg. So yet again, here we are with a trilogy that isn't finished. I mean, they're probably going to run this back simply because of Conor's status in the world. And we're going to have to sit through some other meaningless kind of stupid fight that I don't think Conor deserves. And it's probably going to sell like it always does. But for what? I mean, at this point, Conor is done, in my opinion. I mean, I understand this really wasn't necessarily his fault because of the injury, but you take the injury out of it, how is Conor going to get any better in this fight? Because he's going to get more and more gassed. Poirier is not going to fall for some stupid counterattack like Conor did to Jose Aldo. This was Dustin Poirier's fight for sure, in my opinion. And I wish we could have just had a definitive fight. I wish we could have just finished this off and Conor can just leave and shut up. Because like you alluded to, the antics started the second the fight was over. He was screaming and screaming for doctor stoppage, doctor stoppage. He didn't want the TKO loss. And I get it. I agree. That was a doctor stoppage fight. But boy, do you have to be such a little crybaby about it? I mean, you're supposed to be a UFC fighter. You go on and on about how you're the best and the game was nothing before you and blah, 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 blah. Boy, you sure did cry when you thought it might not go your way. And then it just snowballed from there and he hasn't stopped with the antics. And it's completely ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, the yelling at Dustin Poirier, telling him that his wife was in his DMs and all that stuff. Yeah, that was uncalled for. He didn't need to do all that. And, you know, going back to the idea of continuing this trilogy or whatever, having a round 4 to take place of round 3, I don't like it. I think it's terrible. I think it's bad timing for Dustin Poirier. He's the number 1 ranked contender now. Undisputed number 1 ranked. He should be the next up for a title shot against Charles Oliveira. If he's not, and the UFC is forcing him to entertain another fight with Conor in 8 months, 9 months, or whenever that's going to be, whenever he comes back, then that's detrimental to his career to have to wait for that. He should be, hey, your next fight is against the champ. Start getting ready for it or whatever.
Mhm.
That's what he should be focused on right now. And then say Dustin Poirier does go on and win the championship. Conor doesn't immediately deserve a title shot just because it shores up the end of a rivalry. He's the 10th ranked lightweight right now. 10th ranked. He doesn't deserve a title shot next. He's lost 3 out of his last 4 fights. You can't tell me that he's been on a hot streak that deserves it. So the only way that I would sign off on saying that I'm cool with a Conor McGregor Dustin Poirier fight is if it's 1 for the championship, and if it's 2 after McGregor's beat a few other guys to prove that he deserves that shot.
Yeah, absolutely. And from what we've seen, Conor is not about that. He still thinks he's some sort of number 1 contender, blah, 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 blah. There's nothing there. And I agree with you. I don't want to see a round 4 between these two. I think it's over. I think there's no draw there. For me personally, I know the casual fans will always tune into the names that they know, and obviously Conor is a huge name that everyone knows. But I think you're right. I think it's detrimental for Dustin Poirier to have to wait around for another Conor fight. He needs to be in title contention. They need to move on because weighing down the entire division simply for Conor is stupid. You can find another superstar out there. There are guys who are amazing and they're fighting right now.
Yep.
They're not waiting for one fight to come around once a year like Conor does. He doesn't fight 3 times a year. He doesn't fight hardly at all. I mean, if it's not because of an injury, which I understand you can't fight. You have to heal. But he's going from doing whatever with his boxing crap to trying to fight Khabib, and then that doesn't happen and all this stuff. He's not consistent and he's not winning, like you said. So what is there other than solely his name? And I think that's all he's got left.
Yeah. I think Conor is kind of in the same boat as somebody like a Tony Ferguson. He's at the end of his run, and the more they go out there and more damage they take, the more they're setting themselves up for future failures.
Yep.
They like Conor's made his money. He's making his money everywhere. I don't think he needs the sport. Like I said earlier, he's the number 10 ranked guy. Listen to some of these names ahead of him. Islam Makhachev is in 9th. He would murk Conor right now.
Oh yeah.
Rafael Dos Anjos is in 8. That would be a pretty competitive fight. I think RDA might get him at this point in their careers. Dan Hooker at 7th. Tony Ferguson still at 6th, which I think he's just going to continue to drop. So maybe that's a fight for Conor to get in there and maybe get a win over.
I'd love to see that one. That one would be good.
That one would sell at least. He's not beating Michael Chandler. He's not beating Justin Gaethje. He can't beat Dustin Poirier at this point. He's not going to beat Oliveira. So there's no real fights in the top 10 for McGregor, except maybe the Tony Ferguson fight. He just needs to go ahead and start slinging a proper 12.
Yeah, and I mean the gig is up. I think at this point, I've said before, Conor is a one-trick pony. He never really was a true mixed martial artist. He was a boxer who could kind of survive and do some other things.
Sure, yeah.
And I think he profited heavily off of the lower weight class. Obviously he cut down and made 145 and basically made a name for himself there. And that's a place where if you're a guy who can get to that weight, you have a lot more power behind your punches because everyone has to cut and it's tough at that weight class. So I honestly think that's the only, well, not the only reason. He has talent for sure. But when you're talking about a guy who at this point basically doesn't compete with the top 10, what is there? I mean, he's not some guy who's going to just have some miraculous comeback. There's no way. So I think it's basically over for him. And like you said, he's made money. I don't get where he's coming from because there's no way he's going to come back to the times where he was champ and all that stuff and no one can touch him. I would definitely tune in to a Tony Ferguson Conor fight, but that's about it. I mean, I don't think he deserves another shot against Poirier. I think he's basically done in the contention style of fights because every time it happens, he loses or something like that, and there's nothing for him to say anymore. I mean, he doesn't have the pull like he used to. He still thinks he does, but a smart person can see that he's not that fighter.
Yeah, his trash talk was pretty weak this time.
Yeah, it's dumb.
And people are jumping off of the Conor McGregor bandwagon left and right. You know, we've got our personal friend Adam that said, yeah, I'm pretty much done with it. I heard even Pat McAfee today saying that he went into the fight as a fan of Conor McGregor, but left a fan of Dustin Poirier based off of how he handled himself and the way that Conor reacted post-fight and all that stuff. I think that has a lot of people changing their mind about Conor. So I'm glad that we've been off of the Conor McGregor bandwagon for a while. We jumped off of the John Jones bandwagon before it's fully derailed. So I feel like we're in a good place with MMA. But one bandwagon still needs to be chosen, and we're going to narrow down part of that list tonight, Zach, and that's the NFC side of our Sweet 16 bracket here. And we've got some pretty good matchups this week for you to narrow down and select. Of course, we'll use the same question bank as we used last week for the AFC side of things. So we've got some of those good new questions in there that we got to. And Zach, you know, we've got some good matchups. So this week we've got the Buccaneers versus the Lions up first. Where are you standing with that one? Which one do you think like is going to be the better team for you long term?
It's interesting. Obviously, the Bucs currently have a good team riding off of a Super Bowl win. But I think that's probably going to fall off here pretty soon. Tom Brady can't play more than 2 more years, I would imagine. And then I think they're just going to have to basically start anew. I mean, that's basically the whole team right there. And people kind of flocked to that team because they knew they had a opportunity to win with Tom. And then you got the Lions, who have just been basically awful for years now. So I want to say Bucks simply because they have the better team, but that could fall off very quickly.
Yeah. Defending champs, that's usually a bad time to jump on a bandwagon if you want to avoid getting that kind of connotation to it. You know, you never want to start cheering for a team the year after they win.
Right.
It's bad luck. The Lions, on the other hand, have never won a Super Bowl, so jumping on that bandwagon now makes you look pretty good. They also have a new coach, new quarterback, maybe a new fan in Zach Billings. So this week, the criteria for this matchup that's going to determine the Tampa Bay Bucks versus the Detroit Lions is Zach's choice.
All right.
So Zach, you get to basically weigh the pros and cons in your own head and figure out which one is going to be the team that advances.
Simply because they're the better team, I'm going to say Bucks. I really don't care about either, but at least if I'm going to have to root for a team that I don't care about, I'd rather them have a better chance to win. And I'll take the criticism of jumping onto a team the year after they win, and I'll just live with it. You know, I mean, this was a fate, chance, whatever you want to call it, type of scenario. I didn't just up and choose to root for the Bucks. So haters, I don't have any time for it. So I'm gonna send the Bucks on.
Zach didn't choose the Bucks life. The Bucks life chose him.
There you go.
All right. So moving on, we've got the number 2 seed Green Bay Packers versus the number 11 Chicago Bears. Where are you at with this one, Zach?
I wish the Bears weren't so stupid as an organization. I mean, clearly,
sorry, Jose.
sorry, but clearly Mitch Trubisky is not it, and they passed on Pat Mahomes. Granted, I don't think many people saw Pat Mahomes coming as he is. Nonetheless, they're just not a great organization. But I'm also not too keen on the Packers. I don't know. This one's kind of a wash for me. So hopefully I don't have to choose. Hopefully they choose for me on this one.
Okay. Well, the Packers have the reigning MVP, maybe coming back. They have the reigning best wide receiver in the National Football League in Devontae Adams. They also have 1,000-yard rusher in Aaron Jones. So that's a pretty good offense to be able to get behind. And you didn't even mention the Bears' new quarterback, Justin Fields, coming from Ohio State. Could that be somebody that could, sweeten the deal a little bit going for the Bears, because Trubisky's not there anymore?
Right.
It's Andy Dalton and Justin Fields. Justin Fields is the future.
I can't get too excited about a unproven quarterback, especially a guy who's coming from Ohio State. I mean, those quarterbacks never hardly do anything in the NFL. So yeah, for me, there's really no excitement there for the Bears. At least the Packers have a good team and they have some talent. If Aaron Rodgers finds a new home, it's going to be an interesting team, but we'll just see what the wheel has for us.
Go ahead and give it a spin. Okay. So newbie, this category, this question rather, talks about the best young franchise quarterback. So for the Green Bay Packers, the young franchise quarterback would be Love, right?
Yeah.
Jordan Love. And then for the Chicago Bears, obviously it's going to be Justin Fields. So which of those two quarterbacks would you rather cheer for long term?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. They're both pretty much unproven in the NFL. I mean, it's not like Jordan Love has had an opportunity to prove himself, and obviously Justin Fields hasn't. I think just based on the weapons that are at his disposal, I think I like Jordan Love better because he's got Devontae Adams, who was Aaron Rodgers' favorite target all year and made it happen. You've got a decent running back in Aaron Jones. So yeah, I think Jordan Love probably has the better shot. Justin Fields is going to have to be quite the player to make an impact there in Chicago, because they need a lot more than just a quarterback.
Okay. So what I'm hearing is that the Green Bay Packers are moving on.
Yep, I think so.
All right. And yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think on top of everything you said, Jordan Love has had a pretty good mentor to learn behind in Aaron Rodgers, and whereas Justin Fields is learning behind Palmer.
Right.
Or
Trubisky?
No. Who was the dude that was the backup, the Red Rocket?
Andy Dalton.
Andy Dalton. That's it. What, Palmer? I was thinking Carson Palmer. Way off.
Yeah.
Andy Dalton. So Andy Dalton, good quarterback in the NFL, but as you can tell, he doesn't come to mind very easily when you think about a great mentor.
No.
Aaron Rodgers is a league MVP, former Super Bowl champ. I would much rather have him as my mentor and teacher.
Absolutely.
Moving on. Wow. So the number 1 and number 2 seed in the NFC are still in this thing. Seems like you've got better teams in the NFC than you do in the AFC there, buddy. We've got the number 4 Seattle Seahawks versus your favorite, the number 9 Dallas Cowboys. So obviously I know which way you're leaning on this one, but why don't you go ahead and let the listeners know how much you love the Dallas Cowboys?
Yeah, they're just the best, aren't they? I mean, you've got Jerry Jones out there who thinks he can just spend his way to a Super Bowl, and it hasn't worked yet. But I mean, honestly, it's not all sunshine and roses for the Seahawks either. Russell Wilson is iffy. I mean, he's a good player, but it seems like every year he's in the MVP talks for about 5 weeks, and then the wheels fall off. I don't know if that's his fault or not, but it's an interesting situation they've got going there. They are a shell of their former team that made multiple Super Bowl appearances, won a Super Bowl. They've got some issues of their own. So just because the Cowboys are the Cowboys, I obviously lean towards the Seahawks, but it's one of those instances where both teams kind of have a less than ideal situation going on.
Sure. Yeah, no, I understand, but I think the Cowboys have maybe a bit of an upside because they have all those dynamic weapons that they've paid, and it's not your money that's being spent as a fan. So you want to see your owners go out and get the very best that's out there. So to that extent, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe you would be happy as a fan of the Dallas Cowboys to know that your owner is going to go out and pay the guys that you like. The Seahawks, on the other hand, are interesting because they were great for a few years, and now they've kind of slipped back into being an average team. So it's not like they're, top of the crest anymore, like you said.
Yep.
So let's see what we're going to come up with our question for this one between the Seahawks and Cowboys. Wow. We keep getting Zach's choice tonight. I'm going to have to remove that one from the list for next week. Take your choice completely out of it.
That one's done. It also kind of takes the fun out of it because I've basically already given my choice in my analysis of the teams. But I'll give it again. Yeah. The Cowboys are a stupid organization. And you have a point in that it's probably good for an owner to pony up the money for the good players, but I understand paying Dak because he had a hell of a year. Zeke has not turned out, so that was a bad choice. And I think it's hard sometimes to analyze that stuff because if you let Zeke go and he goes off and makes money somewhere else, what are you going to do after that? Are you going to plug in some guy from the bench? Are you going to try to draft? So it's hard to decide whether or not it's going to pan out. But at the same time, if it were me and if it were my money, I don't know if I would invest all that money into a running back, seeing as how in today's day and age, running backs are come and go. I mean, they stick around for 3-4 years, get an injury, and then they fall off. So I think simply because I just think the Cowboys are a dumb organization, they have dumb fans, I'm going to go Seahawks because I could see myself rooting for the Seahawks a lot easier than I could the Cowboys.
Okay, very well. We'll go ahead and make it official. Move the Seahawks on. Sorry for the Cowboys and their dumb fans.
It's our year. It's our year every year.
Every year, yeah. They're rabid about it every year. And then they fall off whenever they realize they're going to be 8-8.
Yep.
I guess they'll be 8-9 this year. New Orleans Saints, the number 5 seed versus the number 7 Washington football team is our last matchup of the evening. And this one's pretty interesting for me because it's two teams that are essentially starting over. Mm-hmm. You've got the Saints that are starting over, trying to find that new franchise quarterback, and the Washington football team are starting over, period.
Right.
So where are you leaning on this one, Zach?
I think it's going to be interesting to see the Saints this year, to see how aggressive they are. Are they just going to go with what they have and see what they got and see what they can make happen? Or are they going to go out and try to attract a quarterback that's been proven? And I don't know how serious they are about being a contender. They've been top of the food chain there for a long time because of Drew Brees. And obviously now that he's retired, what's going to happen to that team? And like you said, the Washington football team is basically completely restarting. They don't really have anyone solid at that quarterback position. I mean, obviously they tried Dwayne Haskins and let him go. He wasn't the answer. They had comeback player of the year, Alex Smith. That didn't work simply because he's old and beat up. So that team might have some upside. I mean, they're not awful. That's for sure.
They have good defense. They made the playoffs last year.
Yeah, absolutely. So they definitely have some upside, but yeah, it'll be interesting to see how these two teams kind of navigate the waters this year.
Okay. Well, let's go to our trusty wheel and hope that we don't get Zach's choice for the third time this evening.
We got a new one.
A new question, which is called NFL Hooligans. And what this question is, Zach, is if you were to imagine NFL fan bases like soccer hooligans, which city would have the best hooligans? So we're talking about New Orleans or Washington, D.C. having the best NFL hooligans.
I think the early nod will have to go to New Orleans simply because that's known as a party city, obviously. And I think the locals there, obviously Louisiana people, Cajun people, they can be pretty rowdy. And I think if you're going to live in New Orleans and you're going to live in that environment of that's where people go to just get completely out of control, hammered, you got to be pretty wild in and of itself. I mean, if you're going to live in that world, you've got to enjoy that kind of craziness. And I think there's a lot more craziness in New Orleans than there is in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to have to go out and say the Saints are going to be way more of a hooligan fan base than Washington is.
That's kind of surprising. I kind of thought that Washington, D.C. would get a little bit more of a nod, having more hooligans, being that, that's Washington, D.C. There's so much political controversy there on a daily basis. Plus, it's so close to a lot of other major cities that are notorious for gang violence and things like that. You would think that, a hooligan in one of those type of cities would have to always be on their toes to fight off rivals that are coming into their territory. So it's interesting that you're going with New Orleans more on that.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. I mean, I think Washington pulls a lot from like the Virginia area as fans. So yeah, I mean, I guess I could see that, but I don't think they can touch New Orleans. I think that's a pretty easy one, at least in my opinion.
Okay, well, we've got New Orleans going on, and next week we'll be ready for the Elite Eight in our bracket. I believe that's what we're down to.
Yeah, you're right.
4 teams from each side. So, yeah, we're down to the Elite Eight. The remaining teams, one of these 8 teams, Zach, will be your new favorite team. We've got the Buffalo Bills, the New England Patriots, the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Green Bay Packers, the Seattle Seahawks, the New Orleans Saints, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, the NFC side of things, you've got the 1 seed, the 2 seed, the 4 seed, and the 5 seed remaining. On the AFC side, you've got the 2, the 10, the 12, and the 14.
I'm interested to see how it all plays out. I mean, the Bengals are holding on somehow, so that was a shocker for sure.
Yeah, and we'll come up with some new questions. And if you have any questions that we could throw on the wheel, hit us up in the DMs, hit us up in the comments, let us know. We would love to include your questions on this because they're kind of a pain to think of new ones each and every week. Zach, let's talk a little bit about baseball before we have to go.
Sure.
Of course, we've got the home run derby coming up in less than 10 minutes. Who's your winner? Who do you think is going to win this year's home run derby?
Man, it's hard to say with these kind of things because people want to say Shohei because he's just hitting the cover off the ball. I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think he's the favorite. I don't know. It's hard to say. Juan Soto is obviously a good player. It's going to be tough to beat Shohei in that first round for sure. I wish Acuna was playing, but obviously he's hurt.
Terrible news for that.
Oh yeah, awful.
The Braves are officially sellers at the trade deadline because of that injury.
For sure.
I could honestly see Freddie Freeman being dealt because he's a free agent at the end of the year. That's the reigning National League MVP could be available at the trade deadline. That's wild to think about.
I know.
Boston Red Sox could use them. Just saying, Heimblum.
That's funny. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know who to go for. I would assume you're probably going Shohei.
I mean, it's easy to fall back on that when he's the number 1 seed in this tournament. But from watching these things every year, the number 1 seed doesn't often walk away the winner.
Mm-hmm.
I think last time they had the home run derby, everybody was all in on Vlad, and then Polar Bear came out of nowhere and won it.
Mm-hmm.
So it is what it is. I would like to see Trevor Story go out there and put up a big performance. That's his home ballpark. I'm sure it would be special for him to get the love from the Colorado fans out there. I don't know.
It's going to be tough. And I think this one is especially weird too, just because it's not like the guys you'd think. I mean, they got Joey Gallo in there. They've got Sandoval in there. Those are guys that I would not expect to be in the home run derby. So it's going to be an interesting one. I hope Shohei makes it far simply because he's a big name and a lot of people are talking about him. So I think that'll get a lot of eyes on the home run derby. But yeah, I think you're right. I think it's always some random player that just gets on a hot streak and goes away with the home run derby.
It looks like Shohei's the betting favorite, but I think if I were to just pick who I want to win, I think Trey Mancini. That would be a cool story to have him come back and win it.
Yeah,
but
cool.
I don't think he will. I think, Shohei probably has a good shot at it, but it'll be wild to see him possibly win. I think Harvey predicted that he was going to win it. See Shohei win the home run derby and then win the MVP of the All-Star game and then win the MVP of the league.
Yeah.
But still be on a fourth place Angels team.
Yeah. Wouldn't that be wild? I mean, you couldn't win a whole lot much more as a player. I mean, he went out there and did his job, but it sucks to be on a crappy team.
Yep, sure does. It is what it is. Trout's been living it his whole career. Now it's Shohei's turn. Do you think that Shohei's going to sign a lifetime deal to be an Angel, or do you think he'll get out at the first opportunity?
I sure hope he doesn't. I mean, that'd be the stupidest thing ever. I think he needs to find his way to – well, I say this. I was going to say I think he needs to find his way to a National League team and be just a absolute ace, and he can fill in that pitcher's spot. But I think the DH is coming, so that might not really matter, AL or DL.
I got into a debate about this at work with a guy, and he was saying the same thing, that Shohei needs to play in the National League. And I was explaining to him, I was like, no, he's actually better suited to be in the American League because he can DH and just have to worry about hitting. He doesn't have to worry about fielding a position and standing out in the field 5 days a week. He can go out, take his swings being a DH, go back into the dugout, sit there, do his arm exercises, do whatever he has to do. And then on his days that he pitches, he also just swings. That's like an extra batting practice day for him when he's pitching. So it's not that big of a deal for him to pitch and then be DH the rest of the week. Whereas in the National League, he would have to play a position on top of that. So if he's not pitching, he's playing left field or playing second base or wherever they stick him. And I think that is actually more taxing and more work for a guy than just being a DH.
Yeah, that's a valid point. If he is able to be a DH, then he just easily fits into that slot.
Yep.
So, yeah, that does make sense. And I think that's coming after this CBA. We're going to see both leagues have the DH. So it probably doesn't matter a whole lot.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
But I do think he needs to find another home. Do not sign some stupid deal with the Angels. I mean, I would get out of there, honestly. And I'm kind of
as soon as possible. Yeah,
I'm surprised that Mike Trout signed that deal because he could have signed that deal with any team.
Anyone. Yeah, he could have went to New York and got paid 10 times as much, probably.
Right.
What are some of the big shockers for you now that we're officially at the All-Star break, as in regard to standings? What teams are jumping out as teams that you didn't expect? For me, the Boston Red Sox being at first place in the American League East is one of the big shockers. This is a team that everybody thought would be a third at best, and they've set the pace for the American League East up until this point. But then, looking over at the National League side of things, the Giants have to be the biggest shocker. Still out front, still leading the NL West. But other than those teams, Zach, anybody else shocking you in any way?
The Braves are a shock. And even before they lost Ozuna and lost Acuna, they weren't on it. I mean, they weren't winning games. And you're talking about the NL East, where the Mets are on the top of that, and they have been for some time. That was a huge shock. Both you and I thought that the Braves were going to be able to run away with that. It did not work out. And then, of course, the Cardinals. I would have never expected that we'd be in fourth place at the All-Star break. So that was a shame to see. And I think you're right. I think the Giants are probably the biggest shocker. I thought they were just going to have to be content with third place because the Dodgers and the Padres were going to be fighting it out, and they're still on top. They still are winning. It's wild. So yeah, I think that the biggest shocks are on the NL side of things.
Yeah, I agree. I think the American League's played out pretty much how we expected, with the exception of the AL East. The Yankees not being in contention is kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. The Braves, they've had a lot of injuries even before Acuna and Ozuna got their injuries. Their pitching staff got broke real early on in the season. So I think that's been a big contributing factor to why they're sitting around a 500 record right now. But, also the Reds. The Reds are kind of a shocking team this year in a lot of ways, with Jesse Winker and Nick Castellanos. They've been the new Bash brothers, and they've been crushing the ball since opening day. And it's been kind of surprising to see that the Reds have put up a second place pace in that NL Central to this point. The Brewers, of course, are leading the way in that division, which I think a lot of people expected, but those Reds being some sneaky good teams.
Yeah, for sure. And especially if the Cubs continue to slip and if they become sellers, I could see the Reds moving up into second place. That'd be pretty wild to see, because they
are in second place right now.
Other than and hold on to second place for a while, that'd be wild. I mean, I don't think anyone expected that. So yeah, that'd be pretty crazy. And I think if they had decent pitching, they could really make a run for it, because I think that's where the Brewers really hold on, is because they have very good pitching. They've got Corbin Burns, they've got Brandon Woodruff, who are holding it down on the starting pitcher side of things. And of course, Josh Hader is their closer. And I think that's where they make their money. And that's, on the other hand, where the Reds really suffer, is they have Luis Castillo, and that's about it. I mean, their bullpen is not great. And those Bash brothers have to really be hitting for them to win games. So if they had a little bit more help, I could see the Reds being a lot better than they already are.
Can you imagine if Trevor Bauer had decided to stay in Cincinnati and he didn't move out to California and meet this alleged woman that he had his issues with or whatever, and was just pitching in Cincinnati, and they had his arm plus Castillo? Then they could really start to build around those guys. They could be leading the NL Central at this time.
Yeah.
It's crazy how everything has changed. And, now, of course, with Bauer's situation, that's a whole nother conversation for a whole nother podcast, because we got to wrap it up pretty soon. But that's one that's definitely going to be in the forefront of a lot of baseball conversations for weeks to come.
Yeah.
Zach, you got anything else you want to talk about tonight?
I'm good.
Cool, man. We're just a couple weeks away from the 3-year anniversary show. So thank you guys for sharing with your friends, sharing on your timelines and all that stuff. We definitely appreciate it. All the retweets, everybody that's shared or retweeted any of our episodes in the past few weeks, and any episodes up until the 3-year anniversary show, we'll go into a drawing to win some Nest Podcast t-shirts, Nest Podcast hats. We've got all kinds of stuff in our store. You'll get your choice at some primo swag. So just go ahead and just hit that share button so that you can get entered into the drawing for that. We appreciate you guys listening. Please tune back in next week, next Monday night at 7:00 p.m. on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. That's where we throw our live stream up there. So go ahead and check us out live. Get in the comments, talk to us, let us know your thoughts and feelings on all of the topics that we are talking about. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.